Hello and welcome back to Pass the Turn. This is another EDH video, and of course it's spoiler season for potentially one of the biggest products of Commander's history, Commander Legends. A set that's designed to be able to be drafted as a Commander format. What's not to like? There is some awesome cards in this set. And stay tuned to the Pass the Turn podcast this week, I believe it will come out, when me and Tom discuss all the spoilers that have been spoiled so far. Speaking of leaked, you're here to see my best picks for the Blim deck. Now, Blim is a fantastic new card that has been spoiled, albeit in Japanese. I did try reading it in Japanese. But it just looks so awesome. It is basically chaos defined in Rakdos, and it's gonna give you access to loads of awesome demons and enchantments and artifacts that you wouldn't normally want to play, but in this deck you do, for the sheer reason of giving it to your opponent. So let me just load up Blim now. So Blim is a Rakdos commander, so he costs 2 generic and then black-red. It's perceived to be, I think it's Blim Comedic Genius is the name of the card. But yeah, it looks absolutely awesome. It has flying, and it's a 4/3. So it's a bit of evasion, and a little 4/3 body for 4 mana is not bad. And the text says, whenever Blim deals combat damage to a player, that player gains control of a permanent you control of your choice. So whenever you deal combat damage to somebody, you give your opponent that you damaged one of your permanents of your choice. Then, each player loses life and discards cards equal to the number of permanents they control but don't own. So this deck, you want to be running loads of different things that you can give your opponents and not mind giving them stuff. So it's in black and red, so there's some awful cards that you can run, and some of my personal favourites that aren't really playable because they're just so bad in this day and age and the formats that we play. But in this deck, you can play those cards and you can give them to your opponents and make them have all of those horrible demonic downsides that we absolutely love here on Pass the Turn. Now, back in our podcast backlog, you can visit an episode where we spoke about the demons, Liliana's contract, and all that sort of demonic stuff. And you're going to find a lot of demonic stuff in this particular deck because there are so many awesome demonic entities that just crave your soul when they're under your control. And Blim is basically the middleman, and he just brokers some deals with demons, but then hands over that demon to somebody else, basically. And it's just fantastic. I just cannot wait to play with it. It's controlled chaos, but there's also some horrible cards in there as well that can take your own life away, and you can just bow out. That's what Rakdos does best. It goes hard or goes home, and you have the ability normally to just kill yourself in Rakdos for glory, and that's what Blim is going to be ultimately doing. So yeah, I've compiled a nice little list of cards that I think would be absolutely fantastic in this sort of deck, and I probably will build it as and when it does come out properly. Yeah, let's go through some of those cards now. So first of all, let's go through some enchantments that I've found. So the first one is Blood Funnel. So this costs 1 black and 1 other for an enchantment, and it says non-creature spells you play cost 2 more to play, and then whenever you play a non-creature spell, counter that spell unless you sacrifice a creature. So it's making your opponent's stuff cost 2 less to play, but whenever they cast a non-creature spell, they do have to sacrifice a creature. So this can either be upside for yourself, because non-creature spells you play will cost 2 less. So if you've got a lot of non-creatures in the deck, this could help that bring that cost down for you. But if it's under your opponent's control, their non-creature spells are going to cost 2 less. But every time they play a non-creature spell, they're going to have to counter it unless they sacrifice one of their own creatures. So it's just one of those hoops that they have to jump through in order to cast spells. So that's why I thought it would be quite good. Bloodfold. It only costs 1 black and 1 other as well. It can really disrupt someone's play if Blim gives it to them. Next we have Captive Audience. This is an enchantment from Guilds of Ravnica, I believe. So this costs 1 black, 1 red, and 5 others. So very, very awesome card. And this is an enchantment. When Captive Audience enters the battlefield under the control of an opponent of your choice. So it's not blimmable. So this will enter the battlefield under your opponent's control to begin with. But to be fair, it's too good to ignore in a deck like this, where you just want to have permanents being that are owned by you, controlled by somebody else, because of that second line of text from Blim. You want to have stuff that you've given your opponents, whether it's through Blim or through other means like this. So Captive Audience. At the beginning of your upkeep, choose one that hasn't been chosen. Discard your hand. Your life total becomes 4, or each opponent creates 5 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. So it's just absolutely horrible. It's just a huge timer on the game once that comes out, and again, it's just too good to ignore. Very, very high mana cost in black and red especially, but if you can get it off and they can't get rid of it, that's pretty much their game's over. Next we have Colfaner's Plans from Lorwyn, I believe. Black, and 2 for an enchantment. When it comes into play, or when it enters the battlefield, remove the top 7 cards of your library from the game face down. You may look at and play cards removed from the game with Colfaner's Plans. Skip your draw step, and you can't play more than 1 spell each turn. So this is just ultimate upside for yourself. So when it comes in, you exile the top 7 cards of your library, and you can play those cards. Fantastic. But then what you want to do is give that to somebody else. So they will have to then skip their draw step, and they can only play 1 spell each turn. So it's fantastic. You bring this out, you exile the top 7 cards, and you can play those cards as long as they remain exiled, which is absolutely fantastic. It's basically you drawing 7 cards, or just making your hand size 7 larger with those 7 cards, basically. And if you still control this, obviously you have to skip your draw step, and you can only play 1 spell each turn. But if you give this to somebody with Blim, they're fucked, basically, because they can have to skip their draw step, and they can only play 1 spell each turn. It's outrageous, absolutely outrageous. Colfaner's Plans from Lorwyn, fantastic card. 40 cents as well at the moment. This deck I can imagine being quite budget. I can imagine there's a few things in there that will probably be quite expensive, but I can imagine it's going to be quite a budget deck, which is going to be funny to play with. Next we have Custody Battle from Onslaught, I believe. What's that? No, yeah, I think that's Onslaught. So yeah, it's an enchanted creature. So an aura in this day and age. Enchanted creature has, at the beginning of your upkeep, target opponent gains control of this creature unless you sacrifice a land. So just imagine enchanting someone's Avacyn with this. They're going to have to sacrifice a land if they don't want you to gain control of that creature. So that's just awesome. Again, that's something that Blim does not have to give away. You can just enchant someone else's creature with Custody Battle. So that's a fantastic card. Potentially does count as removal as well, because you could potentially gain control of it, and it's a way of getting around the indestructible hexproof thing as well, which is always good. Next is one of my favourite cards. I've never been able to use it though, because it's just ultimate suicide pact basically, and that's Demonic Pact. This is an enchantment. It costs black, and 2. At the beginning of your upkeep, choose one that hasn't been chosen. So similar to the Captive Audience. Demonic Pact deals 4 damage to target creature or player, and you gain 4 life. That's good. Target opponent discards 2 cards. That's good. Draw 2 cards. Also good. And you lose the game. That's good. Oh no, that's rubbish. What you want to be doing is playing Demonic Pact, getting those 3 upsides of drawing some cards, gaining some life, dealing some damage, and discarding cards from your opponent. But then you want to time it well so that Blim hits somebody with this, and on their next upkeep, they have to choose lose the game. So that can just outright just win the game, or lose the game for somebody, having the Demonic Pact be under their control at a certain time, which is fantastic. Demonic Pact. Next we have something from 6th edition. There could be other printings. I'm just looking at some various cards on Tapped Out. So this is Forbidden Crypt. This is black, and 3 for an enchantment. Whenever you would draw a card, instead return target card from your graveyard to your hand. If you can't, you lose the game. Awesome. Whenever a card will be put into your graveyard, instead remove that card from the game. So again, it gives you a massive clock. If you give this to somebody else, if they would draw a card, they have to put something from their graveyard into their hand. And if they can't do that, they lose. So it's just a fantastic way of again, just making somebody lose the game through this enchantment. I don't think you'd ever use that in a game under normal circumstances. Next we have Lethal Vapors. This is an enchantment, black, black, and 2 for an enchantment, as I just said. Whenever a creature comes into play, destroy it. Fantastic. And then for 0, you can destroy Lethal Vapors, and you may skip your next turn. Any player may activate this ability. So basically, it, again, doesn't come under control of somebody else. You can give it to somebody else, by all means, because it's a global enchantment. I think they called it a global enchantment back in the day. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, destroy it, basically, is what it says. And then you can pay 0 mana and destroy Lethal Vapors, but then you have to skip your next turn. So you're taking a turn off just to make sure that creatures can then enter the battlefield again, basically. So it's an interesting card, and it doesn't matter who controls it, but Blim can still give it to somebody as to fulfill the second line of Blim's text with regards to the discarding cards and losing life for each permanent you control but don't own, basically. Next is an awesome card, Lich's Mastery. So this is a legendary enchantment. It's got black, 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 and 3 to cast. It has hexproof, so you can't target it. And it says you can't lose the game. So as long as it is out, you cannot lose. Whenever you gain life, draw that many cards instead. Whenever you lose life, for each 1 life you lost, exile a permanent you control or a card from your hand or engrave. So whenever you lose life, for each 1 life you lost, you have to exile a permanent or exile a permanent you control or card from your hand or graveyard. Yeah, so you have to exile a permanent you control, something from your hand or something from your grave. You have to exile it. And when Lich's Mastery leaves the battlefield, you lose the game. Ultimately what will happen is you'll run out of cards to exile. So if someone's got Lich's Mastery, they're not going to lose while Lich's Mastery is out, and obviously Lich's Mastery cannot be targeted either, which is also fantastic. But every time they lose a life, they have to either exile a permanent, exile a card from their hand, or exile a card from their graveyard. And when they have no cards left to exile, they have to exile the Lich's Mastery, and therefore they lose the game. So again, another awesome clock to put on somebody. Next we have Measure of Wickedness. This is black and 3 for an enchantment. And at the beginning of your turn, sacrifice Measure of Wickedness and you lose 8 life. Whenever another card is put into your graveyard from anywhere, target opponent gains control of Measure of Wickedness. So it's pretty good for making someone lose 8 life. So at the end of your turn, sacrifice it and you lose 8 life. But whenever another card is put into your graveyard from anywhere, target opponent gains control of Measure of Wickedness. So it's a weird one, but I just thought it would be quite cool in there because you lose life, but if you decide to then sacrifice one of your cards, one of your permanents or something, and that's from anywhere. Whenever a card is put into your graveyard from anywhere, target opponent gains control of it. So you have to sort of take measures, no pun intended, to make sure that this doesn't end up in your hands at the end of the turn, because you're going to lose 8 life, because you have to sacrifice it and lose 8 life. But if you can discard a card, if you can sacrifice a creature, if you can move something from your from anywhere into the graveyard, you can give the Measure of Wickedness to somebody else. So I thought it was quite cool. Next we have Midnight Oil. This is an enchantment from Aether Revolt, I think. Black, black, and 2 for an enchantment. Midnight Oil enters the battlefield with 7 hour counters on it. At the beginning of your draw step, draw an additional card and remove 2 hour counters from Midnight Oil. Your maximum hand size is equal to the number of hour counters on Midnight Oil. And whenever you discard a card, you lose 1 life. So it's really good because your enemies are drawing additional cards, but then each time they have to remove hour counters from Midnight Oil, their hand size is being reduced, and every time they have to discard a card, they then lose a life as a result of the Midnight Oil. So there's going to come a point where they're not going to have any maximum hands. They're not going to have any hand size at all or hand limit to work with at all. So they're going to have to discard every single card in their hand, and they're going to lose a lot of life by doing it. And reducing people's hand sizes is something that isn't really seen apart from Jin Cataxius. But yeah, Midnight Oil I thought would be fantastic permanent to give somebody. Awesome card. Next we have another enchantment called Nefarious Lich. This is black, 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 black So definitely still playable in a 2-colour deck. So it's an enchantment. If you would be dealt damage, remove that many cards in your graveyard from the game instead. If you can't, you lose. So fantastic card. If you would gain life, draw that many cards instead. And then when Nefarious Lich leaves play, you lose the game. So that is an ultimate horrible card that Blim can just give somebody. So yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. So it nerfs the grave. So every time you would take damage, you instead have to remove exile cards from your graveyard. If you can't do that, you lose, which is fantastic. Whenever you gain life, instead you draw that many cards. So that's interesting. So your life can't change at all. But then when the Lich leaves play, you also lose the game. So if you could just give this to somebody and then remove it, they're dead. Fantastic. Awesome card. Next we have Null Profusion. So this is black and 4 for an enchantment. It says skip your draw step. Whenever you play a card, draw a card. And your maximum hand size is 2. So again, a great card for nullifying people's draw steps, so they can't do anything with the draw. Whenever you play a card, you do draw a card, which is interesting, but your maximum hand size is 2, so you do have to discard a lot of cards. It just interrupts their play so much. So there are times when it could potentially get you some upside, but obviously that's has to be seen to be believed, I guess. But yeah, Null Profusion, very, very good. You can potentially get some upside out of it, but most of the time you just want to give this to somebody else to ruin their plans. Next we have Rite of Bells and Lock. This is a saga from Dominaria. So it costs black and 2, and the first 2 lore counters that are placed will create 2 0/1 black cleric creature tokens. And then on the third lore counter, create a 6/6 black demon creature token with flying, trample, and at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice another creature. If you can't, this creature deals 6 damage to you. So this is basically like your Lords of the Pit, Legion of the Pit style demon. And it's great because what you want to be doing is playing this card, making use of the first 2 lore counters where you get a 0/1 black cleric creature token. And then on the third, before the third lore counter is placed, so on the second turn that this is out, you want to use Blim to potentially whack somebody in the face and give them the 6/6 black demon, which is then going to force them to sacrifice a creature. And if they can't, they take 6 damage every turn. They do have a 6/6 flying trample demon, but that doesn't really matter because you want to be giving your opponents big demons, as we'll come to see later, just to cause more chaos on the table, which is fantastic. 2 more enchantments left that I thought would be worth mentioning. So we've got Witch Hunt. So this costs 4 generic and 1 red for an enchantment. Players can't gain life. It's a nice little static ability. At the beginning of your upkeep, Witch Hunt deals 4 damage to you. And then at the beginning of your end step, target opponent chosen at random gains control of Witch Hunt. So it's pretty good because players can't gain life. That's a fantastic clause to have on any card. At the beginning of your upkeep, it's going to do 4 damage to you. If you don't control it, that's awesome. So you want to play this and then hit someone in the face with Blim, give it to somebody else. They're going to take 4 damage at the beginning of their upkeep. And then at the beginning of your end step, whoever's obviously got the card will then choose someone at random to then give Witch Hunt to. So if Witch Hunt's given back to you, you can just give it back to somebody else because of Blim. You can just hit someone in the face with Blim and give the Witch Hunt back to somebody else and just keep dealing damage to people. And it's just a fun card. All these cards are fun. They're also fun. It's awesome. Fantastic deck incoming. And yeah, again, I'm reading some cards out that I found. If you think other cards will be awesome in the deck, leave a description. Leave a description in the comment section below as to what you think should be in the deck. Next we have Yorgmorth's Agenda, the last enchantment that I found. Black and 3 for an enchantment. Play no more than 1 spell each turn. This is from Invasion, so it's got some really old text. You may play cards in your graveyard as though they were in your hand. So it limits your spell casting to 1 spell each turn, but you can play cards in your graveyard. And then it says, if a card will be put into your graveyard from anywhere, remove it from the game instead. So again, it could be good upside to you. So if you want to play Yorgmoth's Agenda and then just start playing cards from your graveyard again, it's fantastic. You can only play 1 spell each turn, but a lot of these spells are just funny cards anyway, so you normally only play 1 spell per turn anyway. And then if a card will be put into your graveyard from anywhere, remove it from the game instead. that doesn't really matter. So you could get some good upside from this by getting some cards back from your graveyard, but then you can just give this to somebody else. They can only play one spell each turn, and then they're removing whenever a card's put into the graveyard from anywhere, they have to exile it instead. That nerfs a lot of commander strategies. So yeah, just overall fantastic card. So there were some good enchantments that I found. I'm going to go into some awesome creatures and demonic entities that I found now as well. So a lot of these cards I am very, very familiar with because a lot of them are demonic entities that are just horrible to deal with, and they wouldn't really find anywhere else in commander decks, unfortunately. And that's probably why we don't really see much of them anymore, these demons with big downsides, because they just don't really fit anywhere, with power creep being where it is and stuff. So, 14 creatures. We've got Abyssal Persecutor, one of my favourite cards to play back in World Wake when it first came out. I absolutely love this card. It's one of my favourite demons ever printed because it's just an absolute beat stick. So black, and 2 for a creature demon, 6/6 flying trample. But it does say you cannot win the game and your opponents cannot lose the game. So it's a fantastic creature because it comes out as 4 mana for a 6/6 flying trample. So you can hit some serious people in the face with this, and then with Blim, you can give it to somebody else. And that person then can't win the game and you can't lose. So it's just a fantastic, fantastic creature card in this deck. And it's just good. It's just good to see that it can finally have a home in Commander. Because normally the deck that wants to do this, wants to give permanents away, is that Zedru. Obviously Zedru's Jeskai, isn't he, I believe. So you can't have any of these horrible black cards in there, and that's why I think Blim is just fantastic design space. Fucking great design space. Whoever designed this card, pat on the back for just controlled chaos. Fantastic. Next we have Demonic Taskmaster, another card that I used to feature in that deck with Abyssal Persecutor, back when I used to play 60 cards. 60 cards? Fuck off. Right then, so 2 generic, 1 black for a 4/3 flying demon. 3 mana for a 4/3 fly. Fantastic. But at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a creature other than Demonic Taskmaster. So this Demonic Taskmaster is going to make you, or whoever's got control of it, sacrifice their own creatures. You can't sacrifice the Demonic Taskmaster to his own ability, so you do have to sacrifice one of your other creatures. So it's good because it's forcing your opponent to sacrifice your own creatures, which obviously gets around the Hexproof Indestructible, and they can't sack the demon to its own ability, which is just awesome. Next we have the Evil Eye of Orms by Gore. I think it's just a fucking piss take card, to be honest. It's just a picture of an eye, and the creature type is eye. Evil Eye of Orms by Gore. What is this even supposed to be? So yeah, but I thought it was funny. So black and 4 for a creature eye. Non-eye creatures you control cannot attack. Evil Eye of Orms by Gore can't be blocked except by walls. That is a stupid card. This is fucking stupid. Non-eye creatures you control can't attack. That's just funny. And then it can't be blocked except by walls. So if you're playing an Arcades deck, you're fucked if you've got Evil Eye out because it can be blocked by walls. But yeah, this is a card you want to be giving away with Blim. You don't want to control this for very long. Non-eye you control cannot attack. So how would you even get around that? Because Blim can't even attack. He has to deal combat damage, doesn't he? So you wouldn't even be able to give this to anybody else. Unless you've got other cards which give stuff away. There are a few, which I'll mention in a bit. But yeah, that's just a funny card that I thought, thinking about it now, Blim can't give it to somebody, which is a stupid decision on my part to include it in here. But there are ways of doing it, but it's probably not going to be in the deck when I decide to make it. Anyway, next card, Gold Knight Castigator from Shadows of Innistrad, is it? Red, and 2 for an angel. It's a 4/9 flying haste. And it says, if a source would deal damage to you, it deals double that damage to you instead. Fair enough. And if a source would deal damage to Gold Knight Castigator, it deals double that damage to Gold Knight Castigator instead. So it's easily killed, and it's easily killed. Well, easily kill your opponents with it as well. Because if you want to give this somebody else, damage dealt to you is dealt double instead. Damage dealt, if a source would deal damage to you, it deals double that damage instead. So yeah, basically you give this to one of your opponents, and whenever you hit them, it deals double damage, or whenever someone else hits them, it deals double damage, which is great when you're giving people 6/6 flying tramples that they can't win the game with. It's a fantastic card. Awesome, awesome include in there. And sometimes you might want to have a 4/9 flying haste angel on your team, potentially. So yeah. I think I've got a bit of plastic in my throat. Okay, so next card we have is Liege of the Pit. This is a 7/7 demon. It costs black, 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 and 5. It's a flying trample, I might add. And it does also have morph. So if you wanted, you could play this down as a face-down creature just for an extra blocker or something if needed. And then you could morph up, face up for 4 black mana later on. But yeah, at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a creature other than Liege of the Pit. If you cannot, Liege of the Pit deals 7 damage to you. So it'll be good for, potentially, it could actually do a good job for you because it could be a morph blocker. You could flip it face up, attack with it, and then potentially give it to somebody else with Blim as well in the same turn after the combat damage has been dealt. So yeah, and then if they control it, they have to sacrifice a creature at the beginning of their upkeep, and if they can't, it deals 7 damage to them. So it's a nice little clock on someone that doesn't have creatures. But yeah, if they don't want to take 7 damage, they can sacrifice their own creatures, but that's also upside for yourself. And similar to that, we have Lord of the Pit, another big demon, 7/7 flying trample for black, 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 and 4. Flying trample 7/7. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice creature other than Lord of the Pit. If you can't, it deals 7 damage to you. So both exactly the same cards, basically. One's a morph, one's not. Well, Legion of the Pit costs 1 extra if you do want to hard cast it, but still, pretty much the same card. Another awesome card that I've always wanted to put in a deck, but has never really worked, is this one, Thyrexian Negator. This is a creature horror. It's a 5/5 with trample. It costs 3 mana, so black and 2. What is the downside, you say? There is huge downside. Whenever Thyrexian Negator is dealt damage, sacrifice that many permanents. So, again, it could be good. You know, early game, you could swing in with 5 damage to someone that can't block, which is good. And then you don't have to worry about the downside. But then later, you can attack with Blim, give the Negator to somebody else, and then they have to make the choice. Do they attack with it? Do they want the Negator to take damage? If they do take damage, they have to sacrifice that many permanents. So it's just a fantastic little tool to use against somebody and give them that choice. Do they want to sacrifice their permanents by swinging with it or blocking with it? That's up to them. Next we have a card called Sleeper Agent. So Sleeper Agent is a minion. It costs 1 black and it's a 3/3. And when it comes into play, target opponent gains control of it. So you basically just give this to somebody as it comes in. And at the beginning of your upkeep, Sleeper Agent deals 2 damage to you. So it triggers both the permanent you control but don't own side of Blim, and you don't have to give it to somebody else with Blim. It just comes in and it's somebody else's, and it just ticks away their life every turn. And I think there was a card released in Commander Legends as well recently that also had this sort of clause in it as well. I think there are a few Commander Legends spoilers that I will go into in a minute that will focus on this sort of strategy, but yeah, it's just a fantastic way of just draining someone out. That is Sleeper Agent. Next, we have another old classic of mine, another favourite, Treacherous Pit Dweller. So this is a black mana cost, and it's a demon, a 4/3 demon. And when it enters the when it enters the battlefield from the graveyard, target opponent gains control of it. And it's always going to do that eventually because it has Undying. So when this creature dies, if it had no +1/+1 counters on it, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Obviously, you don't do that because when it enters the battlefield from the grave, target opponent gains control of it. So it's a 4/3 for 2 mana, but when it dies, it becomes a 5/4 and you give it to somebody else, which obviously counts towards Blim's second line of text. But yeah, it's just a big creature for 2 mana. What's not to like? Next we have Witch Engine, a card that I believe Rudy tried to build in his early days in Urza's Saga. That is black and 5 for a horror. It's a 4/4 and it has Swamp Walk. So if a defending player controls a swamp, it can just waltz on straight through. And then you can tap it and add 4 black mana to your mana pool, and then target opponent gains control of Witch Engine. A fantastic card, awesome card. You play this maybe, it's cost 6 mana, so hopefully if you've ramped right and all that sort of stuff, you play it on turn 4 or 5, it can tap to add 4 black to your mana pool. So on turn 4 or 5, it then puts you into turn 9 or 10 when you tap it, which is great. That can set up some huge plays. But then somebody else will then gain control of that after you've tapped it for the 4 black mana. And let's say you're playing someone who's mono green, you give that to them, 4 black mana. They can't really make that much use of it apart from paying from generic mana costs, of course. But then that still aids the second part of Blim's text with controlling permanents. Controlling permanents. What was it? What is the second line of text? I did had it up just a minute ago. You don't control, but you. Why am I stumbling on this for? I literally just had it up, then I closed it because I didn't think I needed it. Permanents you control but don't own. Sorry, that's it. Permanents you control but don't own. It still fits into that because you give it to somebody else after you tap for the 4 black mana, and the permanents you control but don't own will trigger on Blim. And next we have an awesome card which was featured in an episode of Game Nights recently, and I thought was really interesting. That's Zancha Sleeper Agents. This is 1 black, 1 red, and 1 other for a 5/5 minion legendary creature. So this could also be a commander, well obviously because it's in Game Nights. So as Zancha enters the battlefield, target opponent gains control of it. So again, filtering into Blim's second line of text. Permanents you control but don't own. So yeah, someone's going to gain control of Zancha straight away. When Zancha attacks each combat and, if able, and can't attack its owner or planeswalkers its owner control. So you give it to somebody else, but it can't attack you, which is awesome. And then it has an activated ability on there. Pay 3, Zancha's controller loses 2 life, and you draw a card. Any player may activate this ability. So that's just a great way of giving, it's just a great political tool. You give it to somebody, but then it can't attack you, and then everybody else can drain that player's life and draw cards. It's just funny. Awesome card. And a couple more creatures I wanted to mention. Zathrid Demon. So this is black, 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 and 3 for a 7/7 flying trample. We have a theme here. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a creature other than Zathrid Demon. So again, that text where you have to sack a creature other than the demon that's triggering the ability. Then each opponent loses life equal to the sacrifice creature's power. If you can't sacrifice a creature, tap Zathrid Demon and lose 7 life. So again, forces the person who's got control of it to sack a creature, forces everybody else to lose life. If they can't do that, if they can't sacrifice a creature, they lose 7 life and Zathrid Demon becomes tapped. So a great way of just making sure that people's board states are under control, and just dealing some chaos around the table. And we have a few other cards as well that I want to mention. So we've got Hellcarver Demon. This is just one of my favourite cards, and it's just good to see a card that could make use of it in Blim. So this is a 6/6 flyer, and it costs black, 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 and 3. It's from Rise of the Eldrazi. Whenever Hellcarver Demon deals combat damage to a player, sacrifice all other permanents you control and discard your hand. Exile the top 6 cards of your library. You may cast any number of spells from among the cards exiled this way without paying the mana cost. So I just think it's just a funny bit of chaos. Because you bring out the Hellcarver Demon, you hit somebody in the face with Blim, you give them the Hellcarver Demon. They can then potentially use it as a blocker, or they can then spin the wheel of mayhem and attack someone and sacrifice all the opponents they control. Or if you include cards in here that make people attack each other, that could also be quite good with Hellcarver Demon, because you have to then sacrifice all non-land permanents you control, or all other permanents you control, and discard your hand. So yeah, that could go well with cards that force people to attack. That's not a line of play that I have featured in this particular video, but yeah, forcing people to attack in this particular strategy could also be quite fun as well. So yeah, I just thought I'd mention Hellcarver Demon. And on that similar vein, Rakdos the Defiler, another awesome card that you could give somebody. It's a 7/6 flying trample. Whenever it attacks, sacrifice half the non-demon permanents you control rounded up. But then whenever it deals combat damage to a player, that player sacrifices half the non-demon permanents they control rounded up. So again, a nice, funny target if you're making people attack each other. So I just thought I'd mention those two in there with the line of you can make people attack each other, because that's quite common in red, making people attack each other, or black and red. We got a few artifacts. We got Immortal Coil. So this is black, black, and 2 for an artifact from Shards of Alara, I believe. You can tap it and remove 2 cards in your graveyard from the game to draw a card. If damage would be dealt to you, prevent that damage. Remove a card in your graveyard from the game for each 1 damage prevented this way. When there are no cards in your graveyard, you lose the game. So it's, again, making somebody immortal, but then whenever they take damage, you have to remove that many cards from your graveyard, and if you can't do that, you lose. So again, something that is just awesome to give somebody else. Graveyards, if you're taking damage and having to remove cards from your graveyard, someone that's not playing graveyard strategy can just lose basically on this from this card straight away. Next, you have Jinxed Choker. Another artifact, costs 3 mana from Mirrodin. At the end of your turn, target opponent gains control of Jinx counter and puts a charge counter on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, Jinx Choker deals damage to you equals the number of charge counters on it, and then you can pay 3 to put a charge counter on Jinx Choker, or remove one from it. So it's just a funny thing that you can pass around, and it's just going to deal a lot of damage as charge counters get placed on it. So I just thought it would be a nice little include on there. Then we have Lich's Tomb. This is a 4-drop artifact, and it says you don't lose the game for having 0 or less life, which is great, right? No. Whenever you lose life, sacrifice a permanent for each 1 life you lost. So it gives you a way of not being able to lose the game, but then eventually you will just have nothing left. You'll just be a walking corpse. You'll have nothing. You'll have nothing to do. You'll just be sat there in your tomb forever, just being immortal and just not playing any magic. You'll just be sat there until you're forced to be like, okay, fine, I lose. So yeah, it's not a nice card to give somebody. Okay, so next we have a couple other cards that I've found as well. Just some weird stuff. I'm sure there's going to be more as time goes on. But yeah, make sure you leave a comment in the section below as to what I've missed, but I thought these were the best ones. First, we have Aggressive Mining, so another enchantment. It says 1 red and 3 others for an enchantment, and it says you cannot play lands. And then you can sacrifice a land to draw 2 cards. Activate this ability only once each turn. So that is just a horrible card to give somebody if they can't play lands. It's just vile card to give somebody. Bizarre Trader, I think, was a good fit for this deck. This is a Goblin, and it's a 1/1. It costs 1 red and 1 other, and it just simply says tap. Target player gains control of target artifact, creature, or land you control. So it's a good way of giving people those big demons, and it's just basically Blim on steroids, because obviously you can just tap and give a player an artifact or a creature you control, which is awesome. Brand, this is an interesting card. It costs 1 red mana. And it just simply says gain control of all permanents you own, and it has a cycling there on there for 2 as well. So if you've given people some stuff over the course of the game and you're like, nah, I want all that stuff back now, you can then just create utter anarchy on your side of the board by just gaining back control of every single permanent that you give somebody else. Form of the Dragon, another interesting card. So this is red, and 4 for an enchantment. I used to play this a lot back in the day. At the beginning of your upkeep, Form of the Dragon deals 5 damage to target creature or player. So it's removal every single turn, basically. At the end of each turn, your life total becomes 5. So you're in Commander, you basically just lose 35 life from this if you're on 40. Well, it's going to be highly unlikely that you're on 40 by the time this comes out. However, yeah, it just drops your life total to 5 when you give it to somebody. Creatures with flying can't attack you, which is irrelevant when you're playing Blim, because you do have flying and you do have a lot of demons as well if needed. But yeah, if you give this to somebody at the end of their turn, their life total is just going to become 5. So yeah, it potentially does a lot of damage to somebody, that card. Next we have Grid Monitor. This costs 4 generic mana. And it's an artifact creature, and it's a 4/6. But it just says you can't play creature spells. So, yeah, you don't want any creatures to be played from a certain opponent. You give the Grid Monitor to somebody else. But it is a good blocker. 4/6 for 4 mana. It's quite a good blocker, Grid Monitor. Harmless Offering, of course. Another way of just giving somebody something of yours. So it costs 1 red and 2 others for a sorcery. Target opponent gains control of target permanent you control. Lovely. We've got Humble Defector. This is 1 red and 1 other for a human rogue. And it's a 2/1. And you can tap to draw 2 cards and then target opponent gains control of Humble Defector. So it's a good little card draw in red. And it's a good political tool as well. So you could tap, draw 2 cards, give the Humble Defector to somebody else. As long as you have that deal with somebody, we give you the back of the Defector. Yeah, they give back to you. And it's a nice little cycle. You get to draw some cards. Trigger Blim'S second ability with regards to permanents you control but don't own. And all that sort of good stuff. Possibility Storm. Fantastic card. Just chaos all round. Red, and 3 for an enchantment. Whenever a player casts a spell from his or her hand, that player exiles it, then exiles cards on top of his or her library until he or she exiles a card that shares a card type with it. And that player may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Then they put all the cards exiled with Possibility Storm on the bottom of their library in a random order. So let's just say you played a Murder from your hand while Possibility Storm is out. That Murder will not resolve. That will get exiled. Then you will exile cards from top of your library until you get is Murder an instant or a sorcery? I think it's instant, isn't it, Murder? So yeah, you keep flipping until you get an instant. You play that instant, then you get all the cards exiled with Possibility Storm, shuffle them up, put them bottom of your library. So it just creates absolute anarchy. And you will see Possibility Storm go off in a after-hours game that we played with Tabletop Republic soon. But yeah, that was funny. Next we have Rust Elemental. This is a funny card. So it's 4 generic mana from Mirrodin. I used to play this quite a lot as well. 4/4 flying, artifact creature. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice an artifact other than Rust Elemental. If you can't, you tap it and lose 4 life. So it's similar to how the demons work, but you have to sacrifice an artifact for Rust Elemental to trigger. And then we have Steel Golem, another card that says you can't play creature spells. Similar to the Grid Monitor, this costs 3 generic mana, and it's a 3/4. But yeah, again, you want to give this to somebody else so then they can't play creature spells. So yeah, there's a couple of cards that I thought were funny and bad gifts that you can give people with Blim is obviously the title of this video. But what would you give? What would you give away? I want to see your comments in the section below. What awful fucking gifts would you give your opponents in black and red that I've missed? Or what creatures would you give them? Or what stuff, artifacts, what would you give them? I want to know what your thoughts are on this card as well. Because I just think it's absolute anarchy. It's hilarious, and it's just going to mess with so many people's strategies. And yeah, it's just going to be funny to play with, which is why I'm just a massive advocate for black and red as well. As you know, I run a Malfagor deck. Deck tech's up there somewhere, and I've played with Malfagor a few times on the channel as well. I'm just a big advocate for black and red, and yeah, absolutely looking forward to building this commander. Speaking of which, if you want to buy any products, Magic Gathering singles, sealed products, booster packs, booster boxes, board games, tabletop games, Dungeons & Dragons, miniatures, go and visit our good friends Level Up Gaming and use our Pass the Turn discount code to receive 2% off and help local game store as well as us as well be recognised for pointing you in that direction. That would be fantastic. And make sure you like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video. And yeah, click the little bell notification to be notified of any future videos. You can check out our podcast. We have a podcast now on Spotify. And you can check out the Pass the Turn Versus series as well. That's the ongoing series that we have at the moment where we go and challenge local game stores to a game of Two-Headed Giant EDH. And that series is going to be featuring multiple guests throughout the Magic Gathering community, I hope, in the future. We've got Pleasant Kenobi coming on for the next episode. Yeah, it's just going to be an awesome series going forward that we just want to continue doing. Hopefully, the dream is to maybe go abroad with it eventually, but we'll see. Go and check that out, and obviously we've got a lot of EDH content as well on the playlist EDH. I'm going to be doing pack opening series and all that sort of stuff soon as well. So lots of stuff coming with Pass the Turn. So hit the little bell notification. That's where I was going with this. And we'll see you on the next one. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Aaron, and yes, have a lovely day. Or what's that bit? I think it's dark now, isn't it? Have a lovely day. See ya.